Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. So wonderful to see you all this morning. Welcome into this space. Welcome into this community. We have a very important conversation ahead of us today and some exceptional guests joining us today. Welcome as we let everybody get into the room here. And we are live on Facebook as well. So welcome to our live stream audience as well. Welcome to Foundation for Black Women's Wellness Morning Coffee. Today, we are talking about domestic violence through the triple pandemic lens, safety and help through the holidays. So it's a very timely conversation here, in particular as we're entering the holiday season and things have changed and folks will be inside. So it's a critical conversation. My name is Aaliyah Stevenson. I'm the Chief Programs Officer for the Foundation for Black Women's Wellness. Lisa was unable to join us today, but is incredibly excited to watch this back and to gather all the amazing information and inspiration that Morning Coffee offers us all. I'm here today with my co-host, April Kagea, who's a Special Projects Manager at the Foundation for Black Women's Wellness, as well as the Foundation team. And we welcome you this morning, where our purpose is to empower a generation of well Black women and to build a community, nation, and world where Black women and families can thrive. So we're excited to be here today. Morning coffees were born out of the desire to refresh, inspire, energize, and inform us as Black women, in particular in the COVID-19 global pandemic, where we cannot be together in space. So we are allowed to be together and gather in this virtual space. And as we call and center ourselves around our collective power, I'm excited to be talking about the power of being in community today. And as we call ourselves into action to cultivate our wellness in very intentional ways. And we're gonna have some very practical and intentional tools to share with you all today. So I hope you all have your coffee, your tea, your kombucha, your water, whatever it is this morning that is giving you energy. And just part of Zoom etiquette, please keep yourself on mute, and please put questions for our guests in the chat box. We have some incredible guests here today, including some return guests who we've had quite a bit. Monique Minkens is joining us today. You will remember her from a really powerful panel during Black Women's Wellness Day this year. We're also joined with a colleague of mine, Jacquelyn Boggess, and also Nestic Morris. Two new guests to Morning Coffee who will inspire you, and I am certain they both will be brought back for future conversations because they are incredibly gifted and talented and passionate around this topic as well as others. We're really grateful to have all three of our guests here today. I will give more of a detailed introduction and share their bios very shortly. But as always, we are going to begin with some timely information and resources for you. And I would invite my co-host, April Kagea, to share those with you. April?
Yes, so some resources we'll put in the Facebook chat as well as in this chat days, abuseintervention.org, End Abuse Wisconsin, domestic shelters, and then the UW Law School also has resources that are available for domestic violence. Also, we just want to mention that there was a new order released by Governor Evers, I believe late Tuesday night, that went into effect midnight today, which also will affect domestic abuse survivors now that they're limiting indoor gatherings to only family members and then outdoor gatherings to no more than 10. So we'll also put that new public health order in the chat as well. And then of course, again, in line with that Mask Up, you can get your Foundation for Black Women's Wellness masks at our website and shop. And we'll also put that in the chat as well. And then now, so the sun is shining. I just want you to let us know how you guys are feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10. Drop that in the chat. How's your morning starting off? And then I'll pass it back to Aaliyah.
Thank you so much, April. Yes, critical changes happening in our community right now with the ridiculous uptick in COVID-19 diagnoses and deaths. And we know in our community, we are disproportionately impacted and have to be extra careful, mask up. We know the holidays are coming up, Thanksgiving. We know that we enjoy gathering with family. We must change our traditions this year to be safe. Last Wednesday during morning coffee, we were reminded, make a plan for how you can feel that being in community without being around your loved ones. We need to protect our elders and others who have pre-existing conditions. So please make a plan for how you can celebrate and be thankful for your loved ones without necessarily being in space with them. And one more shout out. The Foundation for Black Women's Wellness, as you all know, is creating a policy blueprint around what Black women's health in the state of Wisconsin. Many of you have taken part in those conversations. I see many of you on the call today. Thank you so much. You've been incredible. We are having our last conversation this Friday at 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. We would invite anybody who hasn't already taken part in a conversation to please sign up. And I would ask April if she could drop the link for that in the chat. Please sign up. You can ask folks in this space. It's not painful, but it's important for us to hear from you. If you're unable to this Friday, there will be opportunities in the future, but we'd really love to hear your voice in this first round. All right, so now we're going to get into our conversation of the day. I am going to introduce our incredible guest, Monique Minkens. She has been a part of the anti-violence movement for a decade now. She is currently the director of coalition programs at End Abuse Wisconsin, the state coalition for domestic violence programs in the state. She is also a social justice practitioner and change agent who believes service to others should include helpful help that exposes those in crisis to options and choices that allow them to liberate themselves. That's powerful. I love that. Her ultimate goal is to facilitate the dismantling of white supremacy in the anti-violence movement and create a movement that serves all individuals who see support and liberation. I look forward to getting into the conversation around white supremacy, policies, etc., funding that have shaped this movement. And prior to working in this movement, Monique worked in higher education across Wisconsin. So welcome, Monique. We are blessed to have you back with us. Now I'm going to introduce Nestic. Nestic Morris grew up on Madison's South Side. She graduated from West High School. Hold on, take a pause. All our West High School folks, raise the roof. Woo, West is best. And then went to UW Whitewater and is now working on her master's at UW Milwaukee. For the past 20 years, she don't look old enough to be doing nothing for 20 years. For the past 20 years, she has worked in the community to address social change, racism, and oppression with the added experience of working in youth development and with women in the criminal justice system. Currently, she is the outreach coordinator for the Wisconsin Coalition Against Sexual Violence. She has intentionally brought voices of color to the sexual assault field. She offers statewide training focusing on the intersections of oppression in Black women's lives. And under the direction of the Women of Color Network, she serves as co-director of the Wisconsin Women of Color Consortium. She's also the founder of Beautiful Struggle LLC Consulting. She's a skilled public speaker, group facilitator, and trainer. And she's going to school us today. Very excited. Thank you so much, Nestic, joining us for the first time on Morning Coffee. And now for Jacquelyn Boggess, my friend and colleague. She's a lecturer on diversity, oppression, and social justice at the School of Social Work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Okay, also throw up my alumni, University of Wisconsin-Madison. She's also been a policy analyst and legal analyst focused on social welfare policy and practice. She's contributed to the national conversation on family support, income stability, intimate partner violence, and community violence, all with a racial and gender equity lens on the issues. She provides consultation and training nationally to advocates against domestic violence to help them infuse racial equity and cultural humility into their organizations and in their daily work with survivors and victims. She's also a director at Nina Collective, where she works with organizations to transform, support, and create systems and structures that are built around racial equity. She's a gifted teacher. She has lots of learned and lived experience, and we are excited. So, we have some talent here today, And we are really incredibly excited to be having this really important conversation at this time with them. So we're going to jump in to a conversation and would love to begin with you, Jackie. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, the work you do, specifically around domestic violence, and how COVID has impacted your work. First, by taking yourself off of mute.
Every day, you know that, Aaliyah, every day. I forget the mute thing. First, I just want to say I'm just so honored and excited to be here with all of you all this morning. I've been to one other morning coffee and it was uplifting and lovely, and I'm happy to be here today. I wish I could listen and not talk, but I'll talk. So I started I went to University of Wisconsin also in the law school, and I started my my professional life as a lawyer. Did that for about 12 years, and then I came here to Wisconsin and started doing the work that you described in my bio around social welfare policy. And it was specifically focused on men, low-income men, and how they fit into families, community, help, support, those safety net services, those kinds of things. And I went into that work, and the first thing I said was, you can't go around talking about men and fathers and how wonderful and great they are if you don't understand the dynamics and the reality of domestic violence. If you don't get that, then you're going to make a mess. You're going to make a bigger mess than we already have. And for 25 years, I kept saying that over and over and over. And sometimes people hear it and sometimes they don't. As the time went on, the work was to try to help mainstream advocates. You know, most domestic violence programs, shelters, coalitions, everything is run by a woman about my age who's white. And she has Black and brown and, you know, other marginalized folks working with her, and they try to tell her the reality of what they say, remember, we're victim-centered. Remember, we're supposed to be victim-centered and not centered in your feminist belief system. We're supposed to be victim-centered. And so I would go sort of toe-to-toe with those women because they were approximately my age, that kind of thing, and said that you're not being feminist and you're not being anti-racist if you don't listen to your advocates who are telling you what's what and explaining to you what's happening with the folks in your programs and the folks that you have committed yourself to supporting. And so when I left that work recently, the social welfare policy work recently, and began consulting around race, then I put myself out to organizations. So far, a lot of work with end abuse. I've been working with Monique a lot lately. And also a few national organizations. I'm going to be speaking with some folks at the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence in December. I'll get that information in case anyone is interested in that conversation. But it's an important aspect of my work and my life, and people like Monique and Nestic have taught me so much, because I've never worked directly with survivors and victims. I'm usually at the policy level, and the only way I could do this work, the only way I could pretend I know anything about policy, is talking to people like Nestic and Monique and other advocates of color to learn more.
Thank you, Jackie. Really excited that you talk about both ends of the spectrum, working directly on the front lines and advocating on the policy level, both incredibly important, both that need to be centered with that intersectional lens around race and gender. Thank you so much. Monique, tell us about you.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, I have been a part of this movement for 10 years. I started out as a shelter advocate and just kind of moved around. This is the thing about me. I grew up in a home where service was important, and I was a Catholic school kid, and we were told you all must serve. And when you serve, you make sure that you're making your part of the world better. And I believe that. And so I was a really shy kid. I still am a pretty shy person. And she told my principal told me, you know, find something that sets your heart afire. And this is what sets my heart afire. My sister is a survivor, and I witnessed the abuse a few times. And I can tell you that in the moment, we made all the mistakes in the world. And yet she has always been on my mind because it took her a long time to recover. I would say that there's still some residuals that she has from that experience, and it's been over 30 years. And so there was that part of me that said, okay, what sets my heart afire? And then how do I make this right? Knowing that I am the youngest, I could not do anything, and yet I know that other families are in the same situation. And I think about working in shelter. When I worked in a domestic abuse shelter, the greatest conversations I would have with survivors was that their families didn't understand, or they are estranged from their family, or their relationships are strained because of the situation, and why they don't leave. And so also working with college students, there was intimate partner violence as well. And it was really interesting when the person who was doing the harm was a member of the football team, the badge football team, and they needed that person to play. And that push and pull of protecting athletes, but not protecting the survivors who were all Black women in the conversations I had. And so this sets my heart afire. This is where I am supposed to be. And there are days when I am tired and I think about what I need to do. Like if there's a task on my to-do list, and it motivates me because this is where I am supposed to be. So thank you.
Thank you, Monique. You brought up, I did all the wrong things, or we did all the wrong things as a family. And I'm really excited to get into that conversation today about what are those wrong things so that we don't replicate that. So thank you for sharing that. Nestic.
Good morning. I just want to say thank you for having me. I want to be where the Black women at, and I don't apologize for it. And so seeing and being around Black women, especially in the sexual assault field, being able to see y'all faces or your names or whatever, I'm just excited to be here. Everything that Monique and Jackie talked about, same for me. I grew up around wonderful, amazing Black women. And so being able to give them a break is what gives me my motivation. They like passing the baton on to me, like, girl, I'm tired, I'm ready to sit down. And so here I am. I also do work with the Women of Color Network. They are based out of Pennsylvania, full of Black and brown women who are doing the sexual assault work. We live in white Wisconsin, and so we received a grant from the Women of Color Network to come in and do the hard work. Prior to myself and the other 4 women of color at my program, WCASA has done some organizational harm. They have done some harm to Black and brown communities, and some of it I wish I could tell y'all about, but I can't. But they made it very clear prior to me coming on, you know, we suck. We suck at being in collaboration with women who started this work. Black and brown women started this work, and they've been doing it for free for a million years. And so I don't work directly with sexual assault survivors, but if you connect with me, I can find somebody who can help you. So this conversation is very much needed. And we also wanted to give a trigger or content warning. Please step away whenever you need to step away. Please come back whenever you need to come back. we want to be able to have this conversation open and honestly. And so we wouldn't be able to have this conversation and let you know that this might be triggering, this might be take it back, but we want you to, so take care of yourself at whatever capacity that means.
Thank you, Nestic. Thank you for naming that. And I'm just looking at the chat. We ask folks to check in how you're feeling this morning on a scale of 1 to 10. And I know we have an incredible panel because people are really fired up. They're really excited to be here. And I'm really excited for this conversation as well. But yes, take care of yourself, whatever that looks like in this moment, because it's a challenging conversation. And as much as an intellectual practice of learning that this is, there's definitely real life, real lived experience, real emotions behind this. So in this conversation already, the terms domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual violence have all come up. So I just want to clear up any misconceptions around the term itself, domestic violence. What is it? And then also to talk a little bit about what does it look like and who is impacted by it. So if we could start there, maybe we'll just do a same direction there, Monique.
Well, domestic violence is about power and control. It looks like love to some people, and it's about controlling a person. It controls them financially, emotionally, spiritually. It takes at the statistics show that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men experience domestic violence. And it also shows that Black women are more likely to be killed in a domestic violence situation. And so, and when I say Black women, Black cisgender women, Black trans women. So I said 1 in 4, it influences children. If children see the violence and it's not interrupted or that trauma is not addressed, they either decide, I will never do this to a woman or a partner again, or they think that that's the way to go. And so it's all about power and control. I think about, there's this wheel, the Duluth wheel, that talks about the domestic violence and what are those components. And one thing we'll get into as we go on is that domestic violence has, its framework is around white women. And so that Duluth model is great and for white women, white, middle-class, heterosexual women. It's great for them. But there's another model. It's called the Sasha model. It's from the Sasha Center in Detroit, Michigan. And it looks at, and it's called the triangulation of rape. And yet it can, we often talk about how domestic violence and sexual assault are no different. It's violence, right? And so the Sasha model talks about historical trauma, generational trauma, who is allowed to be vulnerable in our communities, who is believed, who's seen as the welfare queen, all of those things that get in the way of people believing. We talk about being believers in this movement, and we are believers until a Black woman shows up, and then we need more proof. And so did I get you, Shalisa? I would say that I'll start there and leave some for Nestic and Jackie, but that's a good place up to start to think about domestic violence. It's way bigger than the framework says it is. And the fact that the framework is so narrow is proven in the statistics that are out there. So.
Thank you for April for popping that in the chat. I was busy searching for that myself, so thank you for that. And we've had this conversation multiple times, and I'm still shocked every single time by the numbers. and understanding that likely those numbers are underreported. It's still staggering, and it should still be staggering.
It should be, yeah.
Become comfortable with those numbers. So yes, let's continue this conversation about who is impacted. So we know Black women are impacted. We understand how the model doesn't necessarily fit our needs for addressing it. Jackie, can you talk to us a little bit about that? By taking yourself off mute first.
I'm sorry. I definitely would agree with everything, obviously, that Monique said there. I would add too that this, when I was doing work early on, we were nervous about talking about the fact that it was impacted, that Black women found themselves victims of domestic violence more often or at a greater rate, because what was trying to be pushed was that, well, they're so violent. Those folks are so violent over there. And so we had some Black women fighting to say, no, it's the same, but it's not the same for all of the reasons that Monique talked about. And also, I know I always go back 200 years or 300 years or 400 years, but honestly, we were supposed to be raped for the economy. We were raped for the economy, to build the economy, to create new little Black babies.
Yes.
Never been a time where our bodies were considered, even sex workers, even now, you jump from there to now, sex workers who are Black, we don't care about how she was harmed or hurt with regard to sexual assault in that regard. So our bodies have been up for, and Black men and other people who feel like they have power, as you said, Monique, power and control over our bodies, nobody's stopping them. Nobody says anything wrong with it. And so it's continuing to happen. And I would say that even inside of all of that reality, that historical reality, that sociological reality that you're talking about, Monique, inside of that are still Black women who want families and want to love someone and have a partner. So she's a real live woman. She's not just a political, pawn for us to say, see, I told you I was right about this. See, I told you. She's a human being making decisions about her own life. And so when we say victim-centered work, we have to be so real about that, because she's living inside of all of those contexts. And our work is to help her be her and stay safe at the same time. And negotiate the reality that her Blackness means what happens to her matters less than to folks in the world.
Oh, we're getting real early in the morning here. There's never been a time where Black women's bodies were protected. I think that's powerful. Nestic, I want to invite you into this conversation as well. On your perspectives around domestic violence, what does it look like? Who is impacted?
So I was just going to piggyback off of what everybody else has already said. It didn't start with you. Jackie went back to 300, 400 years. Black women are always at the intersection of something. And that's particularly holds true when it comes to sexuality and sex and all of those things, where they are the Jezebel spirit if you go to church, and the hoe or the sex worker and all of those things, always at the intersection. And I always tell the people that I train, particularly the white women, and I'm a social work major, so shout out to the social work majors, but most of the social work field and the helping field is white women. And so I have to have an honest conversation with white women about you should not have come into this space to civilize the people that you're working with. And so that is one of the misconceptions about Black women, of being angry and all of those tropes that they use against us. So like I said, always being at the intersection, things like that. Also, another misconception that I really want to drive home to our people is that rape, sexual assault, incest, all of the things that have to do with sexual violence is not only a white thing. It's not, I don't, as my grandmother would say, you need to get that out your spirit, because it is very, very prevalent in our community. We make jokes about the creepy uncle or the cousin that nobody wants to be around. That's a thing. It's not just white people. It's not just trailer park backwoods, Alabama. It's very much in our communities, in our space. And the other misconception that I want to clear up is that it doesn't happen to Black men. Sexual violence does happen to Black men. That didn't start with them as well. As Black women were used as sexual concubines, but so were Black men. They were put on plantations for 5 years to have sex with and impregnate as many Black women as they could. And so that comes down, that's passed down from generation to generation. And then also I have been in spaces with Black men who are survivors, and they say things like, you know, I lost my virginity when I was 9 years old to my sister's friend. She was babysitting me and she was 17. And I'm like, no, sir, you did not lose your virginity. She molested you.
You were raped.
Right. And so we have to get rid of that, that notion that this doesn't happen to our Black boys, and that we're trying to protect our Black girls, and we should, but we also should be protecting our Black children in general.
I love that, Nestic. I think about how, you know, so much has been passed on when you think about white supremacy, and no one got therapy for this. You know, they weren't, the last thing on their minds when they said that Black folks are free is let's get them therapy. It was more, let's think of a new way to control them, right? And since the beginning, since that started, there have been efforts to look at ways how to control us and how to give us just enough to shut us up, and just enough to keep us down. And one of the things that was not on their list was counseling, right? And so there's a lot that has been passed on. I think about, his name was Marion Sims. He experimented on his female slaves in his backyard. I don't know how a backyard looks in a plantation, but I always say his backyard. He invented the speculum, and thanks for the speculum due to our ancestors who were experimented upon without anesthesia, and you know,
because Black women are inherently stronger.
Because we're stronger, and that fed into it. And knowing that Sims is the father of modern gynecology, and there's a statue of him in Central Park. And so just thinking about that, the white supremacy of what's right, and thinking about the women's movement and how social work came out of that women's movement. And it never included Black women. 1913, there was this march on Washington for suffrage, for the suffrage movement, and they wouldn't let Ida B. Wells and others march with them. They wanted their voices, and when they would gather in certain places, they needed their bodies, but not in DC, because it was a segregated city, and there's no way we're going to take this risk of risking what we want because we want to vote, but we don't think you have the right to vote. And so that became the women's movement. The women's movement became the anti-violence movement. And the women's movement also became social work. And so social workers thinking that I don't want to work with Black women. I want to work with everybody else, immigrants, because Black women are immoral and they are violent. And so Jane Addams and Hull House in Chicago, and how she's the mother of the social work movement. And when I encounter white social workers who are here to save, they are here to, instead of to allow women to liberate themselves. They're here to save us from ourselves and tell us how we need to live. All of that influences domestic violence and um, how a program is set up and how what women hear. The feminist movement is saying, leave your husband, leave your partner, when women that come for help want the violence to stop. And so when the movement was set up, it's let's treat these women instead of let's treat this whole family, right? And so you treat the whole family, even in AODA, when someone is in treatment, they pull the family in because otherwise the most healthy person in that dynamic is the person who just had treatment, and the family is still left learning, either learning or still maneuvering around their family structure the way they did to enable and to protect themselves from this person that was in treatment. And so it's so much work to do. The foundation, it sucks. It's sick, and it wasn't made for us, and yet we are inserted into it because that's all we have. And when there is someone who says this isn't working, I'm going to make my own, there are roadblocks that are put in the way, and they're not seen as valid when they know more than that mainstream program would ever know about the people that the mainstream program is serving.
So part of that, I would follow up on that, Monique, is that most of the money for this work comes from the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a pot over here, the Violence Against Women Act, the Joe Biden thing. And then there's another little pot under HHS, which is not a little pot, but another pot under HHS. And it's a little more flexible. But honestly, that one that most of us use, that VAWA, is not about serving everyone in the family. It's about what you said. It's about that design that was created based on white women's idea that they live in a house with this man and he's violent. And the way we can stop him from being violent is to go tell his boss at work or to get it out, his reputation. He's afraid for his reputation. He's afraid for his money. And so she runs away and goes to stay with her grandmother at her house, or goes to stay somewhere where she's safe and comfortable and warm. And so the answer is leave. The answer is you must leave. And so and call the police on him.
Call the police.
Right?
Woo-hoo.
And call the police on him and put him in jail for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the story. That's the story that the Black women start going into shelters. And I started asking, as I was going to meetings around the country, because we would go in and just talk about survivors and what we're going to do about these survivors. And I would say, wait, can somebody tell me, what is the demographic makeup of the women that the people that you're serving? What is the demographic makeup? Oh, we're about this is, Maryland, California, Sacramento, wherever I was going.
Wherever.
85% Black, 95% Black. So then why are we having this conversation as if they're not Black? Why are we having this conversation as if they are not living in this world as Black women who need support?
And why y'all all in the room white talking about these Black women? Sorry.
And then everybody in the room, they bring me in, then they have a Black person, so you can't say everybody. I was there. So then it's my job to raise them, say, who are we talking about, right? And then when you get that question answered, you think about the money, that funding that I was talking about, which is just about accountability, whatever that word means to them, putting the dude in jail. And frankly, I did a project with 4 states, including Wisconsin, and with, at the time, Wisconsin Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And I talked to about 400 Black people, Black and brown people. Overwhelmed. We had a couple of Spanish-speaking focus groups, but we were about 75% Black. And I talked to Black advocates, and I asked them, what is needed? How should we do this? And almost every answer they had was not allowed under the funding. The funding does not allow you to do the things that these women were telling me is what they needed the most. The funding does, because that funding was built to lock up the person who caused harm and let the other person get his money and go off and build a, stay in her new house. A big stupid scene that had nothing to do with those 85, 95% Black women. So if that funding doesn't change, either we ignore that funding and find it somewhere else, or write new laws that make that funding under the direction of Black women who know what they're talking about. Because there are a lot of Black women at the kind of some of the higher levels in there, but the leader is always a white woman, way up there in the federal government. There are a lot of Black women that work there, but the leader is always a white woman, and we're always still, and they give lip service to, tell us more, which is why I was invited to those white groups. Tell us what you think, tell us what you think. And they would take a little bit of it or none of it, or no, we can't do it like that because you're not being feminist enough. Right? And then you just go and say, have you ever heard of intersectionality? Come on now.
They have, but only in a context of university, because we know that once academia grabs a hold of something, it's a thing. And it's like, no, Black women have been living at the intersections since the plantation. Right?
That's the reason Kimberly Crenshaw invented the word, is because Black women living there all that time. And now y'all need to learn. Now they want to turn it into something else about their stuff. But Kimberly Crenshaw was only thinking about Black women and their lives when she created the term. So it is how we live. Okay, let's talk about how we live. So then funding from the federal government has to be about how we live. But we have never done that. We have still not done that.
We can't have nothing, can we?
Listen, nothing, not even intersectionality. We can't even have
they don't take that from us. Yeah.
They already did. I got into at a training that I was facilitating. White woman tried her best to make it seem like, well, intersection happens in the lives of white women as well. And I was like, I don't know, everything went over your head, because I'm clearly talking about Black women right now, and you don't get to insert yourself just so that you can feel a part of the conversation. I know it's not about you today, and that's okay. Like, I have to hold hands, but I'm not doing it for free. Like you would you like for me to come in and do some training? I can do that. How much funding do you have?
I want to talk about funding. I could listen to y'all just go off, and I appreciate it, but I've been taking notes and y'all have said a lot of things. We're in a history lesson here. We're in a policy lesson here. There's so much richness, so much history that certainly I wasn't aware of, all the intersections. If we don't understand what the funding is, we can't understand why the solutions are the way they are. I love what you said, Nestic, around this is, we need to reframe how we talk about it, that creepy uncle, that uncle, that's cousin, that ain't quite right, that this is something that happens in our community, and it also happens to Black men. I have a question follow-up from Facebook that I want to get to, but when we talk about that funding and we talk about the ideas, Kristen asked a great question, which, what are those, what came out of, I guess it's a both and. Jackie, what came out of the focus group as solutions that were informed by Black women and others, and then maybe like Nestic and Monique, like what are you hearing, or what are you seeing, or what do you wish you could do on the ground differently? So I want to bring that to the forefront.
So that was in like maybe the 2007, 8, 9, 10, I don't remember. And I went to Texas and Wisconsin and Minnesota and Missouri. And what came out of it was most women were saying, because I was going there because the work that I did focused on low-income men, right? And so I didn't want to do any policy around low-income men and child support, and I didn't want to do anything until I talked to women first, and until I talked to Black women survivors first, before I made any plans about what I was going to go to Washington and talk to policy about. And so I asked them as my policy consultants, like really, I just asked them, what do you think? Here's what the policy is. What do you think about it? When I took the marriage policy to them, they just laughed, the one where they said you should get married and then there won't be any domestic violence. But anyway, out of this particular set of focus groups, the first thing I asked them was, what do you need? How do you need the policies to change? What do your children need? And then the third one was, how do you want men to be handled in this area? Because what white women were telling me was, if there's any money available for supporting families, it should only go to women and their children. Men should be blocked out. Men should not have anything to do with this money because it's just going to make women, here to go, men taking over, as if Black men are the same as white men in families, right? So when I asked the women then about, well, what do you think about him? She said, look, if y'all don't give him a job and stop putting him in jail, I can't take care of my kids. I can't go to work. I can't get them through school. I can't do the things I need to do. That was the universal, I mean, that's a report. I can send it to you, Aaliyah. But she said, I can't, so for anybody who's asking for it in the chat, but she said, I can't do anything I need to do. She also said, look, you white women, stop telling me about church being the bad place to go. Sometimes it is, but I'm smart enough to know who to listen to and who not to listen to. I'm a church woman. I'm going to be there and they're going to help me or not. And then I'll leave them. Right. But white women were saying, you know, religion, white, liberal, progressive, you know, religion is the bad thing. So they said they want that kind of place to go to take care of themselves. They want the men to get social services. They said, and sometimes if you don't help men, then that means you're not helping my brother. That means you're not helping my father. That means you're not helping my uncle. That means you're not my little cousins. Now I have to pay for their cereal because you won't help their daddy. And they just laid it out. Now I had one woman who said, and I respected her so much. No, two women out of those 200 people, I had two women who said to me, look, this man hurt me bad. I don't ever want to hear about anything good coming to him ever, right? That's just it. And we have to hold that too. We have to hold all of the things that Black women need in their lives and figure out how our policy can match with that. But I will send a copy of that document.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Nestic, were you gonna say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, there are, as far as funding and policies, there are times where I'm sitting at the table with the funders who are literally in charge of the state's money that they're getting from the federal government. And like someone said, like they're always telling them, like, you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do this. However, your girl then came up with a solution. You have to write policy, you have to write for your grants in their language. Yep. Right? So we are, so there's a group of Black women who are having a sister circle. That's nothing but a support group.
Yeah. Right?
So sometimes we're gonna go to April House and we're gonna pull out the chairs in the basement and we're gonna have a support group, but it's a sister circle. And so I have to tell the funders, like, yeah, there's a Native group of women that's doing the exact same thing. It is a support group. However, it's just called something else, right? And so in order to, I hate to say this, but play the game with them, we have to do that, right? And so if that means that I got to tell them that we're having a support group at my auntie and them house, or in the basement of a church or whatever, right? That's what we're doing, and I need you to fund it. So we're gonna have to we'll have to have another coffee conversation about writing grants and policies on talking the way that they talk, right? We've been doing it. We've been doing it forever. However, if we want to play the game with them, then that's just what we're gonna have to do.
We do have to do that.
I
did.
I think, go ahead.
Go ahead, Monique, and then I have a question directed at you from Facebook.
COVID has laid bare all of our societal ills. It's all our businesses on the street, thanks to COVID. And, you know, a lot of women, in particular Black women, they leave a DV situation and they walk into poverty, they walk into homelessness. And we have this grant that talks about homicide prevention. And homicide prevention, according to this grant, is creating an alliance with the police, the lethality assessment program, where you give the police tools to question. But homicide prevention is taking care of homelessness. It's about a livable wage. It's about so much more. The Crown Act, it will be a part of the legislation this coming by session, and it's about not being fired because of how your hair looks. And so we started talking about, how do we look at this differently, and how do we, in our efforts for homicide prevention, look at homelessness, look at all of these other pieces that are really important, because we're not treating the whole family. It's a Band-Aid, right? And so even thinking about the man, and I can tell you, I did not like my brother-in-law. I wished bad things to happen for him, but something happened to him for him to be that way, to come to this, that this is how I'm going to deal with my anger, my frustration, my need for control, or somewhere where I don't feel like I have control of my life. And so we have to treat the whole family and realize that hurt people hurt people. And if we are talking about care for her, we have to talk about care for him. And if we're talking about both of them, because we're talking about the Black community and the Black community thriving, we have to look at all of that. And we have to look at how funding can meet all of that instead of just her need, because we know that's a Band-Aid.
But this is the question. I'm happy that you said that. You brought it up in the beginning. You brought it up right now. Care for, all of you are bringing it up in terms of care for the whole family, treating the whole family. So there's a question that we framed, which was, what does that look like? And then on Facebook, there was a question, talk about family involvement in domestic violence. She stated her mother was abused by her father, and she always wondered why her brothers didn't step in and save her mother from this monster. This is the language from Facebook. So let's talk about, what does it look like to care for the entire family? And then you mentioned earlier, I did all the wrong things. So what are those things?
Mm-hmm. Domestic violence, like I said, is about power and control. And if dad was the head of the household, dad instilled fear in everybody, right? And so, I think about women that would come to shelter who were not allowed to discipline their children. And I remember this one woman, her son got angry and he kicked her. I was like, wow, you just kicked your mom, And I would never do that, right, as a kid, but my family that did not have that dynamic in it, where children see dad belittle mom, hit mom, mom gets consequences for her actions that are not necessarily warranted of that, because she's a grown woman, and so they learn that this is not what you do, or I fear this person. They usually get control of the whole house, or they use the children as pawns, and they use the children and they create this team with dad and kids against mom. And lots of times though, it's the other way around, where mom is the supporter and the protector of the children. And yet she hasn't been allowed to protect her children or protect herself. And then when they leave, there's this need to rebuild the family or reconnect them emotionally. And so it looks like that. And that would be probably why brothers did not help out of fear. Also, we look at poverty in Madison. Was it 93% of single head of households are Black female head of households are in poverty. And if there was a man there, you're going to try and make it work, because you don't want to be out in the streets. It's hard out there. I mean, even without COVID, it's hard to be homeless. I've never experienced that, but I have had conversations with people where it's hard and it's dangerous. Black women are in even more danger if they're homeless, of sexual assault, or they're even more prone to violence. And so I think about my family, things that we did. We kept telling her, just leave. I remember someone saying, you dumb for going back to him. My mother was a yeller, and so she yelled a lot. He would come over, we wouldn't speak to him. And one of the biggest things they try to do is isolate the survivor from people that support network. And so us not speaking to him allowed them to be an alliance. And it kind of pushed my sister away from us because it's us against them, right? And it's always that us against them. I'm not going to call the police on him. I want the abuse to stop. I don't want him to be killed, right? Or I live in low income housing. I want the abuse to stop. I don't want him to be killed, and I don't want to be evicted. And so there are just so many things that play into it that make it difficult for Black women.
And all of those things, I would add to that there should be places where people don't have to be together. To that question about why didn't the brothers step in? Usually when brothers step in, it's some kind of additional violence, right? Then everybody gets in trouble, or everybody goes to jail, or the woman is devastated watching her son, her children, So sometimes you do have to step in. Sometimes brothers do step in, and that's the right thing to do because people's lives are at stake. In a situation like that, what we mean by helping the whole family doesn't necessarily mean showing up at the family and doing a round circle where we're all holding hands. And that's not what it means necessarily. It may mean that she has a list of places he can go because, Black men don't have a place they can go and be. What we found in our work is that in the families we were dealing with, the man's name was not on any, this is very poor families. He's not the renter. He's not the mortgage owner. He's moving from house to house. He lives on his girlfriend's couch. Then when he gets mad at her, he gets a new girlfriend, or he's got a mother, or he's got a sister, and he never has a place where he lives, right? So one of the things that would help is if there was some kind of support for low-income men where they don't have to come live with you. Right? And so then he can get maybe job, you can't get employment if you don't have children. You can't get the kind of supports that poor people need if you don't have children. You have to have children to get those kinds of supports. So when two people don't live together, then one of them has the children and the other one does not. And so the one that does not has no supports. She doesn't want him to be homeless the way Monique is talking about. Or sometimes he has the kids and she's the one that's in some kind of distress around drugs or, some kind of thing, she's in distress. Then he doesn't want to kick her out because then she has nothing. Because if you don't have the kids with you, you don't get anything.
Nothing.
So it's the one with the kids that gets the stuff. So what we need is a way to support parents, no matter where they live, with their children or without. Provide avenues and ways of parents not having to live together if that's not what's best, what's safest, what they want. Sometimes there may be a romantic relationship and sometimes there's not, but you kind of save people's lives so you let them live with you. That's a ridiculous outcome. So supporting the whole family means giving parents and people who aren't parents or someday might be parents or may never be parents, supporting those adults regardless of their connection to children, would be a way to help the whole family without suggesting that the whole family has to stay together and live in the same space.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
I think about women in DV situations where they may get W-2 or Social Security, and they come in and take their children because they're living in this situation that they can't afford to get out of. And they will take their children and then take their money. The money stops coming in, and then tell them you have to get an apartment and a job and do all of these things in order for you to get your children back. That's like,
so she stays with him so she won't lose her children.
Right. It's like a joke. It's like, it's a joke. How am I going to do that? I haven't worked in this many years because I've been taking care of my children. Or it's cheaper to do this than to have a job because I have this many children and they won't have health care, whatever it is. But they will take your children. They take your children. You lose your Social Security. You lose W-2. And then it's like, now dance, that's what it seems like dance while we shoot at your feet. And it doesn't end.
The system is rigged. We have a lot of work to do to support the policies and the funding practices that you all need to do the work that you're doing. I want to end. I look at the time. Thank you, Erin. I look at the time. Nestic, can I begin with you? We've talked about a lot today. What would you like everyone to leave with today? What would you like to say to the individuals or family members who are suffering from domestic violence?
You're deserving of healthy relationships, whether that be platonic or not. You can start your healing journey at exactly where you are. It could be today or it could be 5 years from now, and you deserve safety and good things. Black women don't often get told this enough, but you're deserving of good things. So,
Jackie, what would you leave us with today?
I would say that we know that the violence doesn't have to do, victims should always know that the violence is not about them. It is about power and control. And it's not just about the power and control of the person who's causing harm to them and their families. It's about the way we run our country with regard to power and control. And it's having an impact on her and her family. And I would say finally that the most important thing is for us to give those survivors and their children space to dream, to be whatever, to create whatever, to know that the whole wide world is theirs and there are things they can do and create. And it's our job to figure out how to give them that space.
Thank you. And Monique?
I echo everything that's been said. The biggest thing is you deserve to be you deserve to be safe. And there is nothing that you can do that would compel anyone to hit you or exact any kind of violence upon you, but you deserve to be safe.
Thank you. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be well. There's root causes to this, but when you're in the middle of it, all you can see is your situation. There are resources. April, if you can pop those back in the chat again. Monique, you mentioned counseling services. Please reach out. There are, it sounds like, multitude of solutions that work best for individuals and frameworks that we can follow and work that we can support. I am so, I just want to give a round of applause and just so grateful and thank our three guests for being with us here today. Monique, thank you so much for continually saying yes to our ask for you to be with us and share your expertise. And Jess, Becky, and Nestic, don't think that you are getting off the hook. We will see you again. Now that you said yes, you forever have to say yes. We are so grateful for you. And so we are grateful for our time. This is never enough time. We should have had an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, because this was a history, sociological, and intervention conversation wrapped into one. If you look in the chat, people are really excited and really grateful for you. And so we're going to leave with our usual parting words. Know thyself, love thyself, heal thyself. Our wellness starts with us, and we have the power. And with that, remember to be safe, be healthy, be well, mask up, be safe, be careful, community. And we will see you in December for some really important conversations again. So sending love to the community. See you later. Thank you.